a brand new animated series called Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. You know we got to talk about it today on Spider Fan. Hello, my webbed wonders, and welcome to another episode of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider Fan, the podcast that combines saving faith with spider fandom, brought to you by Geek Devotions, a network of podcasts made by devoted geeks who are devoted to letting you know that you are loved. That's right. If you don't listen past this one moment, know this: God loves you. He has a plan and a purpose for your life. Don't give up. And joining me today in the web space is one of the original Spider fans, the guy who was reading Spider-Man comics back when Stan Lee was still writing them, none other than my dad, Bobby Boykin. Welcome to the web space.
Hey, thank you, son.
Well, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
I'm retired now. I worked at Bossier Parish Community College in biology, in all the sciences. Science has always intrigued me and been a part of my life. But I did grow up with Spider-Man, and the new show makes a lot of nods to that. The way that the art is, of course, it's all updated to fit this time and this space. But I used to, back in the day, sneak a new issue of Spider-Man into my literature book because they were about the same size.
Yeah.
And each, once or twice a week, we would be introduced to something we were supposed to read. And in our class, we'd get about 45 minutes of read time. Mm-hmm. And I used 45 minutes of read time.
Well, it's literature.
It was. It expanded the world.
It's probably just more entertaining.
Yes.
So when exactly did you come into Spider-Man? Like, what was going on in the story when you started reading?
It was kind of a hit and miss. Small town, and it took a while for the comic books to arrive, that kind of thing. What sticks in my mind from that era is the Morbius issues. And I remember waiting for that next edition,
so you jumped in when he had 6 arms then.
Well, I read through that. Yeah. And it was, the vampire Morbius deal. Yeah. And, but that one, sticks with me.
Cool. All right. Well, let's just dive right into it. Obviously, today we're talking about Disney Plus's new animated series, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and their dive into the new series there. And as you mentioned before, the artwork is very, very comic book. I mean, not just the framing. A lot of it was framed like comic book panels, but it looks like a hand-drawn comic book. Some of the cell shading and the line work, it felt like a comic book come to life. And I especially liked the color scheme of Peter's clothing, that canary yellow and that baby blue. It reminded me of Steve Ditko's first issues when he was first drawing Spider-Man. Peter Parker wore that all the time. He had a yellow vest and a blue pants with a blue jacket, and that was the color scheme for his outfit. And I thought that was a neat nod to the classic comics.
Yeah. And the way that it's on the screen, it's like an updated, flat screen comic book. Even has the elements of the little corner stamps and all that in the beginning. They did, like I mentioned, update it, like in the opening scene, there's the city, but what used to be just, one color is now more shaded, and you can see smog, and the characters have a good dimension to them. I remember getting a magnifying glass and magnifying the image until you could see little red dots. That was the skin tones, and stuff like that.
The Zipatone.
Yeah, but it was really, it's a good nod.
Yeah. Trying to stay focused on things. We'll get into specific plot points here in a little bit. but trying to stay focused on stuff that's not too spoilery. Let's talk about Spidey's costume.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the traditional red and blue. Well, I mean, it is red and blue, but
Right.
it looks more homemade.
Yeah.
And what was your response to that? What did you think about that idea of making it look more kind of thrown together and stitched together?
Well, in the original comics, that's what he had done. He made his own costume,
Right.
and the web shooters, that comes later, I guess. But it's more, to me, more mechanical, more like Dr. Octopus kind of thing. It doesn't, we don't know how he came about all that, but I get that. Kind of futuristic look. This Peter Parker has access to materials that my Peter Parker in my age would not have had.
Right.
So you could speed things up a little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also like that. Like, he has a jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. His costume doesn't look like something he'd sew together. It looks like different things he got together and just kind of pieced together, which I guess kind of makes sense. Back in the 60s, when Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were first writing this, home ec was a class, and not just a class for girls. It was, you learned how to sew, you learned how to do these kinds of things.
It was family living.
Family living, right?
We had shop and we had home ec, and then somewhere in that time frame, they put a thing called family living where it was co-ed.
Yeah.
And you cooked and we had a little embroidery class, a little string embroidery.
So a Peter Parker who lived in that era would know how to sew together a costume, whereas Peter Parker growing modern day, the idea of sewing isn't, it's kind of a lost art for a lot of the younger kids. So it makes sense to have a kid who, he grabs a jersey with a spider emblem on it and a red ski mask and kind of stitches it together. I also think that the way they did his apparatus of his web shooters drove home the idea that this is a kid who, he's super smart. He knows how to make web fluid and web shooters and design that. But also, he's a poor kid in Queens. He doesn't have access to microcircuitry and things of that sort. So it really, for me, it drove home the idea that, this is just a neighborhood kid.
Yeah.
It's not what I expected, but I appreciate the thought behind it to give him that homemade poor kid from an apartment complex look.
Yeah. They use the pressurized tanks, for example.
Right.
It wasn't something easily available, in my generation. We had little compressed air pellet guns, little bitty tanks and nothing you could crank up. So, and I like that nod. It's you utilize what you have available in that time frame. And of course, this Peter Parker's got a lot more available.
Right. Let's talk for a second about something I noticed. The way that they talk, it sounded very, now, we're from the South, so it's not hard to sound like a genuine New York accent, but that's something I've noticed that a lot of the other Spider-Man cartoons haven't really fixated on. Spider-Man sounds kind of generic. He doesn't really have an accent. They'll have other people who have these New York accents. But for this show, and I picked up a little bit in some of the Tom Holland movies because he sounds like a little more New Yorkish, but especially in this series, Spider-Man sounds like he's from New York. He has that New York sound. And it's subtle things in the way he pronounces some words, but I thought that made a lot of sense because he's supposed to be from New York.
From Queens.
Yeah, from Queens.
Yeah.
So I thought that was neat that they incorporated that into the voice acting, that there's this, like when he's getting out, he's saying goodbye to his Aunt May. He says, "All right, I'll see you later, May." I can't even do it right, but he doesn't sound like he's a Midwestern guy who happens to live in New York. He sounds like he's from that area.
I love the fact that they kept the wit in Peter Parker, and life's not a joke, but hey, we got to live it. So let's laugh it.
Right. Right. All right. Well, let's get into the spoiler section because I got too much I want to talk about that. So, folks, if you're listening and you haven't watched this series yet, put a pause on this, go watch it, then come back because we are officially entering into spoiler territory. All right. First thing I want to talk about. Can we talk about the genius that it is that for the cameo in the first episode, we have Doctor Strange, which is Steve Ditko's other property that he drew.
Yeah.
Steve Ditko was known for two things, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. And I thought that was amazing that the cameo they worked in was Ditko's other property.
At the beginning.
At the very beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that whole otherworldly vibe. It was very much the MCU's Doctor Strange. I could tell they were channeling their inner Benedict Cumberbatch there.
Yeah.
But I thought, they could have had anybody. They could have had Captain America, Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, Hulk, anyone. But the guy they chose was Ditko's other property. I thought that was really smart.
Yeah.
The monster. Did he remind you of anybody?
Yeah, Venom.
Yeah.
I thought already we see the bad guy. Very venomish.
Yes. Even not just the coloring in the eyes, but the way. I think at one point he even sends his arms forward
his
like it's a symbiote. Let's talk about the spider for a second.
Mm-hmm.
It's not radioactive. It's a spider from another world. Yeah. That's interesting because on one of my previous episodes, I had a reaction to The Bottom Shelf, which, by the way, if you're not listening to The Bottom Shelf, also a podcast by Geek Devotions, you should. It's a place where they look at terrible movies and ask ourselves, do they really belong on the bottom shelf? But they were reviewing Spider-Man 77.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they talked about was it was made at a time where radioactivity could do anything. If you made something radioactive, there's no limit to what it can do.
It didn't have as much knowledge as we have.
Right now we know it doesn't really do all those things. But I made the point there that at the time it was this newfound thing that they, with radioactivity, you could achieve anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you also see that in some of the writing of Stan Lee's comics. I mean, radioactivity made Spider-Man. It made the Hulk because of the gamma radiation.
The Fantastic Four.
The cosmic rays.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that kind of the new thing now is interdimensional travel, the multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they use to explain a spider that can give someone spider powers.
It's just like in Star Trek, warp drive. It's never explained.
Yeah.
But it is the constant through all of the Star Trek years, all the, whichever one you want to jump into, they have warp drive and they can go fast. They don't go incredibly fast, or the fact that space is incredibly vast.
Right.
But that constant allows them to do things that, you run out of gas.
Right.
That kind of thing. And so with this spider that's not hooked to radioactivity, which we know more about now, it won't do that, that kind of thing. We don't know what an interdimensional spider can do.
Right. Yeah. So it advances the story. It takes us to, okay, well, what's the cutting edge science now?
Mm-hmm.
And let's use that to explain the spider. So I thought that was a neat update.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the classic, it should be a radioactive spider. But, I found, because they're doing a lot of this stuff for newer generations. And a lot of the things I've noticed is it's not the classics, but if you're asking yourself, what would that look like today?
Mm-hmm.
If Spider-Man were to be made today,
mm-hmm.
like you said, we know irradiating a spider won't make him transfer spider powers. It'll just kill the spider. But the cutting edge of science is multidimensional travel.
Yeah.
So that, and chances are if Jesus doesn't come back and they're doing Spider-Man in another 50 years or 60 years, they'll probably have something completely different.
Yeah.
That makes the spider transfer his powers to that generation's Peter Parker.
And it'll have enough mystique about it that it'll be okay that it did that.
Right.
You know?
That's like when they did Ultimate Spider-Man, in the 2000s. One of the changes they made was it was a genetically altered spider instead of an irradiating spider. Well, at that time, they had cloned Dolly the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
We had just started understanding all that we did about genetics and how you can
mapping
manipulate
DNA.
things. Yeah. So at that time, that was the cool science.
Yeah.
And so it's neat that as I've lived long enough to see the changes in the origin story to update as the science moves with it.
Well,
you know?
And I've been on the planet a little longer now, and I have seen Dick Tracy's wristwatch become a reality,
right?
And the communicators from Star Trek. You know, we have cameras that take better pictures than the single lens reflex that I grew up with. So, you know, I understand what you're saying. It's just, you know, science fiction becomes science fact in about 50 years. Because we just, you know, if you can think it, God maybe can lead you to it.
Right. That's right. Let's talk a little bit about the fact that when we pick up with Peter, before he gets his powers, Uncle Ben's already died. And May is raising Peter by herself, but Uncle Ben has already passed away. And they don't go into exactly how he passed away.
Or why Peter's living with Uncle Ben and Aunt May.
Right. They didn't go into his parents.
No.
So how do you think that will change the story of Spider-Man? Because originally Uncle Ben's death is what made him become a superhero. With great power comes great responsibility. He had to learn that lesson. By having Uncle Ben die beforehand, we almost get a Peter Parker that's a little bit already heroic. He doesn't need Uncle Ben's death to make him a hero. Let's talk about that a minute. What's your reaction to that?
It's kind of like, you know, Peter Parker is in a place where, you know, he's in Queens and, you know, he has no hope of attending this school that he's about to attend. So just with what he's got, he's made the best decisions with the resources that he has, and that has advanced him forward. And now all of a sudden he's given these new powers, you know, if you will, and instead of using it for personal gain, you know, all of his life he's used his resources to better himself and to help others. And now, even with these new powers, I mean, instead of being the bad guy and robbing the banks, you know, and getting the cash from the pizza guy, now he is using his newfound powers for good. And so, you know, and it seemingly is intrinsic. And it didn't have to be pulled out, didn't have to be brought out.
Right. It's like he's a hero for the sake of being a hero.
Yeah. Doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah. Which is, it's interesting because having a tragic origin has become such an integral part of Spider-Man over the years that it's kind of refreshing a little bit to kind of hit the reset button and say, okay, let's do this a little bit different. Let's give him a hard life, but instead of the hard life chastising him for his selfishness and making him course correct that way, let's make it something that he's overcome. Let's make it something that he's getting past. You know, in the show, when Nico is threatened by the monster, he intervenes right then and there. He, you know, whereas in the original story, he sees a robber run by and he's like, whatever. In this one, he jumps right in with no powers at all, even. He's fighting an interdimensional monster to protect this girl just as a reflex.
Because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I kind of, I don't know. We'll see how it develops as the series goes on. But that's an interesting change that they've made, that they don't have the selfish kid who has to be kind of smacked in the head with a bad circumstance to make him switch. One of my previous episodes when I reviewed Amazing Fantasy 15, I actually said that when you're reading Amazing Fantasy 15, up until a very specific point, it's like you're reading the origin of a supervillain. Because he's the kid who's smart, but he's always picked on. He has an elderly couple that's taking care of him, but everyone hates him at school. He's socially awkward. He gets these spider powers, and the first thing he wants to do is right the wrong of the kind of life he's lived. He runs off and he tries to make money, and then because of his negligence, his uncle dies. And there's a point where he can say, the world isn't fair. It took everything from me, and now I'm just going to lash back out at the world. Mm-hmm. But instead, he takes responsibility for himself and says, no, this is on me. I did bad. So now I'm going to choose to do differently from here on out. He has a redemption moment. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it a superhero origin instead of a supervillain origin. With this version, it's like he was already a hero to start with. Mm-hmm. He just didn't have the powers yet. Mm-hmm. And gaining the powers is a way of catching his abilities up to where his heart was already.
Yeah.
And that's a neat and interesting change on the character. Well, that actually makes a perfect segue into our next section. Fasten your seatbelts, folks, because my spider sense is tingling. All right, folks, welcome to Spider Sense Tingling, the part where we take stuff from the TV show or the comic or whatever it is we're talking about, and we make some spiritual connections. And Dad just talked about how the fact that Peter does the best with what he's got in the situation he's in. He's always got this level of optimism. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm going to do the best that I can no matter where I'm at.
And I like that change for a couple of reasons. There's not some big climax that happens. You know, he is in a situation that is not good.
Yeah.
But he makes the best of that situation. And then now he's in another situation where there's a lot of good. But, you know, now what do? Well, I help others with the good and not myself, you know. And then as you know, with great power becomes great responsibility. Mm-hmm. And if you are irresponsible with that great power, then you mess up.
Right.
You know, and it reminds me of the story of Joseph. Mm-hmm. Joseph was just a regular little kid, you know.
Yeah.
Now, he was sort of flippant like Peter Parker in that, you know, he was going, hey, brothers, guess what? I had this dream. And y'all bowing down. Even Daddy and Mama bowing down to me, you know. So he kind of put himself in a box.
Yeah.
But then when he was put in a pit and sold into slavery, he didn't just lament and say, well, I'm going to die here.
Right.
He was the best slave that you could have, you know. And he did the best he could with each increase in power, and I see that with Peter Parker as he goes through. At any time, he could always be bad, and you know, and Joseph at any time, you know, he could always have been bad.
Yeah,
he could have yelled and said, "I'm the one that interpreted that." He didn't, you know, or Potiphar's wife's story could have gone different, you know. It could have been different when the brothers came back in need. You know, he could have killed them all right there or tortured them or made them bow down.
Right.
But each time God puts him in a place, he just does the best he can with what he has where he is.
Yeah.
Peter Parker is doing the best he can with what he has where he is. And when he gets put in a different place, just like Joseph, then he still follows that trend. And I think that is an underlying message that there are good people in the world. There really are. There are people who are just doing the best they can where they are.
Yeah.
And there's always someone that has more.
Yeah.
And there's always someone that doesn't know what to do with that more.
Right.
You know?
One of the scenes that I noticed in the show, I noticed that in this series, they really leaned heavily into the friendly neighborhood aspect.
Yeah.
This Spider-Man, he's not fighting supervillains yet. He's fighting muggers. He's fighting people. There's a really heartwarming scene where you see Spider-Man bring a webbed up person to a pizza place and hands him a wad full of cash and says, here's the money that was stolen, sir. And he said, yeah, you know, I turned my back for just a few minutes and they ran off with it. He said, yeah, about that. And then you find out that the criminal, I said, put that in air quotes, criminal that Spider-Man is webbed up is actually a young lady. and she's crying, and she says, "I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find a job, and I can't find a job, and I saw the money there, and I panicked, and I just grabbed it, and I ran away, and I'm just so sorry." And Spider-Man says, "Look, I know she did bad, and that's bad, but she's just down on her luck. Could we maybe let her go just this one time?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, okay, fine." And that reminded me of the story this reminds me of the account in John chapter 8 where the Pharisees bring before Jesus the woman caught in adultery. And they're doing this with the full intention of trying to trap Jesus into a situation, to kind of prove that he's either just like them and shouldn't be speaking ill of them, or he doesn't follow the law of Moses. And it's this beautiful picture where Jesus says, "Let he who has no sin cast the first stone." And of course, all the Pharisees, they just kind of drop their rocks and walk away. And he looks at the woman and says, "Where are the people that condemn you?" And she said, "Sir, no one's here." Then he says, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." And the crazy thing is, in that circumstance, Jesus was the only person who had the right to condemn the woman. He was the only perfect person there. And he was the only person who could look at her and say, "You know what you did was wrong, and I judge you for it." He was the only person there. But he said, "I do not condemn you." He chose to not punish her for the sin. Now, the circumstances that she was brought there, they were already not following the law of Moses, because someone had to witness the act in order for her to be stoned. So the fact that they brought her already meant that they were violating, and the guy that she was doing the act with was also supposed to be stoned.
Whereas
he's not there anywhere there. So these were already questionable circumstances. But even beyond all of that, Jesus looks at her, knows that she's guilty of the sin they're accusing her of, and says, "I don't condemn you." Now, he does say, "Go and sin no more." He doesn't say, "Oh, it's okay, I'll see you next time." He addresses the sin in her life and says, "You need to stop doing this thing." But he redeems her, that he says, "I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more." In other words, we're going to wipe the slate clean here. And you have a fresh start. And I thought of that in that scene with Spider-Man where he's like, "Yeah, what she did was bad." And no one's denying that. But can we take a look at the circumstances that she's in and maybe not hold this against her? And the pizza guy says, "Yeah, okay." And
now Peter does tell her, "Hey, don't make me regret this."
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because
he deals with the fact that you stole money. This is not a good thing. So it's not like, I'll see you next week when you try to rob the guy again.
And what I got out of that same story also was that Peter or Spider-Man did not tell the pizza guy, this person is guilty, and you need to prosecute. He does turn her over to him, says, "Look, you're the one that has last word in this,
right?
But let's can we step back and look at this?" And there, I don't know if you noticed it, but there was a help wanted sign in the pizza. Now the pizza owner did not offer her a job.
That's true.
Which I instantly thought that's where this storyline's going to turn to.
I did too.
Instantly.
Yeah.
But he didn't. Now, he didn't prosecute her, and they let her go. But he didn't say, "Yeah, come on, you work for me." It's sort of like a Hallmark moment.
Right, yeah.
That didn't happen. And in life, many times that Hallmark moment does not happen.
Right.
Now, it's not, gloom and doom and the gavel falls either.
Right.
He could have, but she does get a chance at redemption.
Right.
Right. So I saw that too.
Yeah. So that is my Spider Sense tingling. Check out Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man on Disney Plus, and leave some comments in the chat. Let us know what you thought about the show, things you liked, things you didn't like. How does it compare with the classics? Is it a good update for the Spider-Man mythos? Let us know. But until then, thanks for listening, guys. Be sure to check out all things Spider-Fan and all things Geek Devotions on all of our social media. Go to geekdevotions.com. Everything's there that we do. And thanks for joining in. And until Next time, keep your web shooters full, your spider sense alert, and your eyes always focused on Jesus.